strikeouts in a game. 20.
Swung on and driven to deep left. And it's high. Nice ball. It's gone. Yankees win. Yankees win. Bernie Williams homers deep in the left field seat to lead off the 11th inning at a 1-1 finish. And the Yankees beat the Orioles 5-4 to win Game 1 of the American League Championship Series. Burn, baby, burn. He said it again.
There it goes! Into history! He's done it! He has done it! 62! Aaron Judge is the American League single-season home run leader! The AL King! Case closed!
What is going on, baseball fans? Welcome to another installment of the Baseball Banter Broadcast. And as you saw in the open there, we are continuing our series here on the state of the franchise from championship years to rebuilding years. Every team has a story. And today we discuss the San Francisco Giants with our friend Josh Lewis. What's going on, Josh?
Hey guys, I am excited for the first time I get to talk about Giants on a podcast. So I am very excited to be here. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. So I always like to start this series and kind of bring a retrospective to the 2024 campaign. So kind of gut reaction. What is your thoughts on the 2024 Giants before we get into the upcoming season?
Boring. If that's a good way to put them from last year. I mean, it's just constant like mediocrity over the past few years. Obviously, we had the big 107-win season and whatnot years ago, and then it's just been constant like mediocrity since then. And so it's been just one thing after another of just like 500 ball. Like it's like, oh, like it's like we were allergic to it all last season. It's just like, oh, we'll get to 500. Oh wait, now we go on a 3-game skid or whatever. Like it was just, oh, now we get to 500 again. Oh, now we're 5-game skid or whatever. Like it was like we were allergic to that mark last year. And so it kind of came to a head. It was a lot of frustration. Obviously, Giants fans used to the 2010, 2012, 2014 years. This is not something that they are accepting of. And so this last season, it finally came to a head with obviously a bunch of shakeups in the front office and just so I think it was just kind of like, you know what, we're tired of being mediocre and we're going to start making some changes. And so I do think that there was a lot of things during the season that were outside of that front office's control, as there is with any front office. But at the same time, like fans were tired and it was just kind of boring. It was boring baseball. It was boring to watch. I watched probably all except for maybe like 10 games last season. And just because I'm that kind of guy, but at the same time, it is like, I love baseball, but at times it's like, man, this is boring. Like there is just no fire. There's no energy. There's no like, it was just a very kind of cold and just not a lot of fun baseball. And so I think a lot of fans felt that, and that is kind of part of what led to some of the changes.
So us Yankees fans felt in 2013 watching our team fall apart in June and our owner going on the radio going, I don't know why the fans were upset. Really, Hal? You end up 500 in the third week of June, bro. Like, yeah. Hello? Maybe if you actually showed up and watched the game like your sister does, maybe you'd know what's going on around you. But yeah, I hear you, man.
Yeah, definitely a tough year. But when we look ahead now towards 2025 and some of the major acquisitions that were made, there are some standout names that the Giants picked up this offseason. Obviously, you know, at the top is Willy Adames to address the need of shortstop. You got in Justin Verlander, you know, and then you had some minor league signings from some guys who could play important roles like Lou Trevino, Jake Lamb, Joey Lucchese, amongst others. Of the players that were acquired by the Giants, which one kind of stands out the most to you, and which one do you think might be kind of a dark horse impact player?
Yeah, so I think fans and myself included were excited for them to do something, not just kind of the same old over the last few years of just kind of like little tweaks and 1 year deals and like all these kind of little things that the previous regime was kind of known for. And so this season, I think like Willie Adames is the obvious one, right? Like you said, like he's the one that's like, okay, we got our shortstop problem fixed ever since Brandon Crawford started declining and ended up going to the Cardinals. Like we haven't had anybody solid there. And to pair him with Matt Chapman, who kind of, I would say that's the under the radar one. Like Matt Chapman signed so early and people forget that he was technically opting out and could have gone to free agency and whatnot. And so I think that getting that done early and getting our left side of our infield done early was huge, with some pieces there that will be there for some years to come. And so Willie Adames, obviously the big one, just because like we need a little bit more pop, and I think we still need more pop than we have even now adding him. And so he's the one that hopefully, fingers crossed, can break this long streak of not having a single hitter hit over 30 home runs in a season. Since Bonds did it, that's a really long time. So hopefully Adames can finally break that for us. I think Chapman maybe is even capable of that. He hasn't done that since he's been here, obviously, but so having at least a little bit more pop is good. Somebody that can at least drive in some runs and whatnot. So Adames is the big one. And then I would say Verlander, even though it's a big name, I think that's a little bit of an under the radar kind of signing. I did see a lot of fans kind of kick back of like, why are we paying him so much and whatnot? And I'm like, it's $15 million, guys. It's really not that much when you see freaking Bregman signing for 40 mil. So, I mean, it's like, it's really not that much in the grand scheme of things. And honestly, I don't care if he throws a single pitch for us this year. I want him there talking and like getting everything over his career into the brains of all of our young pitching. I really don't care if he's injured all season. Like people are saying, oh, what about the injuries? He's coming back from an injury. I don't care. Like I don't care if he does not throw a single pitch for the Giants this season. It is worth it to me, and it's worth the contract that he was given just to be able to pour into those guys like Birdsong, like Hicks, like Harrison. So I love Verlander as a competitor. I love the way his mind works. I love the way that he plays the game. And so I was really excited to have him just in the building. I was watching highlights on Twitter this morning, or X this morning, of him throwing with the guys and being in the bullpen with the guys. And I'm just like, this is what we need from him. And so even though the name is huge, first ballot Hall of Famer, like it's kind of an under the radar thing because of that reason of I really don't care how well he pitches. It's his intangibles that I want.
When it comes to, as you said, alluded to with Justin, there are those injury concerns, but there are some players on the roster that have, kind of more prominent injury concerns as well as for the 2025 campaign. So, according to MLB.com, got a few guys on your list: Keaton Winn, Tom Murphy, Wilmer Flores, and obviously the big one would be Jung-Hoo Lee. Which of the injuries, is kind of the most impactful, and if there's any others that you've heard of through the grapevine that could be something to pay attention to?
Yeah, so all those, another one to keep an eye out for is Lamont Wade's hamstrings, if they can hold up during a season. I know like first base was a big need for us into the off season, and just with the inconsistency there. And Lamont Wade is good. He is a good player to have in your lineup. He gets on base. He's just not very fast. So having him at the top of your order in front of your RBI guys is a little bit of a concern, especially if he's like nursing hamstring injuries and leg injuries and stuff like that. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. Again, like you said, Wilmer Flores' knee he's coming back from. He had kind of a weird off season. Like, is he going to be a Giant? Is he not going to be? Are they going to offer him like all the? Is he going to opt in? Not opt in? Like, it was just kind of a weird contract situation for him. So I'm interested to see how he comes back. But they kind of stood pat. Like, they didn't get in on Pete Alonso. They didn't get in on Christian Walker or Paul Goldschmidt or any of these guys that were available at first base just to hold the spot for what we'll get to later. But the like just the that platoon is going to be really interesting. Wilmer Flores against lefties and then Lamont Wade against righties. Because Lamont Wade's not going to be playing every day. We know that he's not going to be playing against left-handed pitching. He can't hit left-handed pitching worth a lick, but he's really great at right-handed pitching. So gets on base for you. And so like the lineup will move around a little bit depending on where those guys finish. So yeah, so it's just those two guys, their legs, how they do. Jung Hoo Lee's been running. He's been looking fantastic. I'm super excited to see him for a full season. I was really excited to see him last season, obviously, like with the injury running into the wall and whatnot. Like, it's kind of weird for me. Like, at least it was his shoulder. Like, it's kind of weird, like that's a positive thing. Like, at least his legs are under him. He'll be okay. Like, he's been swinging and he should be good for spring training and for regular spring training and for opening day. And so, it's basically like he's a rookie again. Like obviously his background, he's played for a while still, but at the same time, he's still kind of a rookie. He's still kind of one of these quote unquote young guys, even though he's been in the game for a little while now overseas. Like, he's going to be kind of grouped in those young players of like, hey, what are we expecting and what can we see from him this year? And let's see what he does with a full season. So Keaton Winn is kind of a bummer. Like, we'll see kind of how he progresses. Like, he's just a good arm. Like, you can never have too much pitching, and he's a solid arm to have in our whether it's in our rotation, whether it's at AAA, whether it's in the bullpen, like wherever he is, he's a good arm to have. So, but for me, for my money, it's going to be focusing on the legs of our two first basemen.
Josh, let me ask you this. Like, you mentioned that they didn't go big this offseason. Well, I mean, they signed a diamond to over $100 million. I shouldn't say it.
Yeah.
Didn't go big, but especially with the prominence that this team has had in the last 20 years or so, they're like expected to compete with the likes of the Dodgers, especially being 100%. In the NL West and literally being a two-team race, in my opinion. Well, 3 now, you got the Diamondbacks kind of creeping into the equation, but why do you think that they didn't spend bigger than just Adames and Verla? Is it a money thing? Do they have dead money on the books that's deferred? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a few things. I think the biggest thing is the Giants never believe in rebuilding. It seems like they're never like, hey, we're just going to suck for a year or two and we're going to retool a little bit and kind of rebuild, get our minor leagues. Our minor leagues are not that good. Like, our prospect list is not that great. There are some guys I'm excited to see coming. However, overall, we don't really have that great of a minor league system. And so, but they don't see it as like, hey, we're going to suck for a couple of years and really load up on draft picks, a la the Orioles the Red Sox have done a little bit of that and whatnot. But those, the Royals, like teams that do it that way. They're always like kind of tweaking and retooling. But this season felt a little bit different. I think this season, like, Buster Posey's now in charge, right? He's the leader in the front office now. Very different than the previous regime. And so I think it was a little bit of like, hey, we kind of not even shot our wad too early. Like, we signed Chapman and Adames really early. It was more of a like, okay, like, let's start kind of getting the ball rolling in some of these changes. Let's change the culture. Let's change kind of the attitudes around here and kind of get everybody in a different mindset before we really go balls to the wall, get as like the stars. And I mean, they were semi in, on like Soto or like just checking in on different guys. But I think they got, and I think the fans felt it too. I think they were, a shout out to the Blue Jays. They weren't as bad as the Blue Jays, but they were kind of tired of being like the second fiddle of like being in on all these guys over the last few years and then getting turned down. It was bad. And I think everybody was just so frustrated that they're like, that the Giants weren't willing, it seemed like, to just be like, okay, that's the offer for that player. We're just going to beat it by $10 million. And we have the money. Like, it is not a money thing. They're one of the bigger markets, not as big as the Dodgers or Yankees, obviously, but they are one of the top 5 markets. And but they haven't been spending that way over the last however many years. They didn't even spend that way really during the World Series years. And so they've always kind of been like, how can we do this fiscally responsibly? And I think everybody freaked out because Buster came out at the beginning of the offseason, like when he first took over and was like, hey, we're going to like cut some costs and blah, blah, blah. And everybody's like freaking out. And then like 5 days later, he signs Willy Adames. So it's like cutting costs does not mean we're not going to sign anybody. It just means, hey, let's trim here, let's trim there. They kind of reevaluated some of the front office positions and stuff like that, and realigned some of that to do that, some of that cost cutting things that they were trying to do and goals they were trying to meet. And so they are in a position, and like it's one of those things where this season it felt like, to me anyway, like let's just start to get the ball rolling in the right direction. Like let's get Adames and Chapman in place. Okay, the left side of our infield is really good. Okay, our outfield is pretty set with Jung-Hoo Lee, Elliot Ramos, and then kind of whatever they decide to do in right field, whether it's Yaz or Matos or whoever. And then like let's start the ball rolling in a positive direction. Let's get somebody comfortable at second. We've got an all-star catcher in Bailey, hopefully all-star catcher in Bailey, in best defensive player in the game, in my opinion. But that, like, let's start going in a positive direction, and let's change the culture and the feel around here so that next year, the years after that, we can really start going after the bigger guys, like, who knows, Vlad Jr. or whatever. I don't think it'll be Vlad Jr., but like guys on that kind of tier. Like, okay, like now we've established a place where guys want to go play. I think that's the biggest thing with the Dodgers. Guys want to go play there. And so I think trying to turn things around and making San Francisco a place where guys want to go play is what this season is going to be about.
Well, they all want to go to the Dodgers because they know if they go to the Dodgers, they're going to get money deferred and they're going to be getting paid in all the 50s. I mean, shit, Mookie Betts,
Yeah.
I think, is going to be getting paid $25 million at 52 years old. Like, that's just insane to me. And I so hope to God that MLB comes down in this next CBA and puts an end to this whole deferred money stuff, because the players that the Dodgers went and got, it's like, where are you going to put all these guys? Like, where are you going to play all these dudes? Like, it just blows my mind. They went and signed Conforto. They bring Kike Hernandez back. They bring back Teoscar Hernandez. I'm like, wait, where are you going to put these guys?
Yeah, you only have 9 positions. But
they have like a 9-man starting rotation, for Christ's sake.
To be fair, I mean, they in the World Series threw 2 bullpen games. I mean, they need that starting pitching depth, because it's so, not just for the Dodgers, but all across the league, is that position is so volatile that you cannot guarantee that Snell is going to be healthy. You can't guarantee that, like for us, you can't guarantee Logan Webb's going to be healthy. I mean, we had at one point last season, we had 2 starting pitchers that were healthy. Like, that was it. And then, our bullpen was it's just a tumble down effect of like all the different things that can happen with that starting pitching. So I am for what the Dodgers are doing in terms of their roster construction. But yes, you're right. Like there is going to be some changes, I'm sure, in the new CBA, whether it's has to do with deferral, whether it's salary caps, floors, whatever. There is going to be some changes coming down the pike. But for this season, at least, it's going to be like, you can never have too much pitching.
So as we kind of move into the next section here of the question and answer session, when you look at the 2025 San Francisco Giants, who do you believe is the X factor for success, and what does that success look like?
Yeah, so I had to really think about this one, because I'm like, oh, there's so many like unknowns, it feels like, going into this season, hope-filled unknowns for me, that hasn't been as hope-filled in season past. But there's so many. I'm like, where do I want to land? And for me, it's a little bit of an kind of flying under the radar X factor. I don't think many people would would go this route. I think they're going to look more at like Willie Adames or Jung Hoo Lee or like those kind of guys. For me, the X factor this season is Tyler Fitzgerald. Can he man second base on a consistent basis? Can he be our second baseman? He came on like gangbusters last season and like just it came out of nowhere for most people. And you're just like, okay, well, he's been a shortstop. Can he make the switch to second base? Can he be our everyday second baseman? Can he utilize his speed more than he did this last season? This last season, it seemed like he was young, right? He was just trying to get his feet wet. He's just trying to figure out, like, playing on the major league level, what all this is and what all this means. This season, it's like, okay, like you played enough last year. You know now, like, this is the season. I would love to see him run more. I would love to see him given the green light a lot on the base paths because he's quick, he's fast, he has that ability in his game. And so I think if he's at the top of the order instead of like batting 7, 8, 9, and he's at the top of the order in front of those guys like Chapman and Adames and even Lee. Bob Melvin said Lee might be batting third at some point this year as well, even though he's not really kind of that pop stereotypical third spot hitter. But getting Fitzgerald into in front of those RBI guys is going to be really key because that's an area that the Giants have really struggled in, is just getting guys in. Like there was not a lot of struggle necessarily. If you look at the stats, there was not actually a lot of struggle of guys getting on base. That was not the problem. The problem was RBIs. The problem was getting those guys in from on base. Like we talk about, Lamont Wade was one of the leaders in the league of on base percentage, but he never scored. Like he would get to first and then just stay there. And so it's just getting guys moving around and getting a little bit. And I think Adames will help with that too. He's not a base stealer per se, but I think if I remember correctly, he had over 20 last year. Like he's got a little bit of that element to his game as well. Jung Hoo Lee, I'd like to see him run more. But Tyler Fitzgerald, for me, he's the X factor. He's going to be kind of that engine, so to speak, of like if he's going right, if he's stealing bases, if he's running, if he's got the energy, if he's holding down second base well defensively, then the Giants are going to be in really good shape.
For sure. In kind of my pre-gaming for this series, the guy that I kind of picked out as the X factor for San Francisco was someone you mentioned earlier, and for the reason you mentioned it earlier, and that's Verlander. I think that what he brings and those intangibles that he brings to that pitching staff can help develop a lot of those young starters that you have in San Francisco. I think about what he can do to kind of help the longevity of even a guy like Logan Webb, who has been, baseball's Iron Man when it comes to pitching innings the last several years. So I think that for me, looking at what he can do from the mental aspect of the game for the young guys in that rotation, for even the guys in the bullpen, I think that having that kind of veteran leadership, another coach in the dugout kind of thing, is something that can play big for San Francisco in 2025.
Yeah, I agree. He's a great one. And the same thing, like I think going back to your injury question earlier, I think like especially last year, like guys were just gassed. Like Jordan Hicks was a starter for the first time. Hayden Burnsong and Kyle Harrison were not used to throwing that many innings. And I think that their legs were just gone. Like they didn't have that foundation. And so then you started seeing some of the shoulder soreness and elbow soreness and stuff like that. And I think Verlander will be really, really good helping them in that category specifically. Like, how do you maintain yourself for a full 162 game season? How can you get to Logan Webb's level where you're starting 25, 28, 30 times a year? Like, how can you get to the level that he's been at where you're pitching for 20 years? Like how, and so having him, like you said, those intangibles of just how to upkeep yourself, I think will be really valuable.
Now, I know you alluded to this earlier, but in looking at the Giants' top prospect on MLB.com, Bryce Eldridge, tell me a little bit about him.
Man, I'm so excited for him. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, can he start first base tomorrow? Like, I know he's not ready, but like, I want him here so bad. And I think everybody feels that because you watch him hit and how he did in the minors last year and how fast he blew through the minors last year. He's our only guy in the top 100 for MLB's prospects. And I think you said he's at 25 is where he's ranked at. And you're just like, man, like we have somebody that we can look forward to bringing up. And I know Posey has come out and said, he's like, hey, we're going to take it slow. We're not going to like, because I think that happened a lot with some of the younger guys in the previous regime. Luis Matos, for example, you call him up, he gets player of the week, and then he doesn't see an at bat for 2 weeks. Like you don't want to do that with somebody with such an upside as Bryce Eldridge does. And so big, strong guy, like stereotypical, like what you picture as a first baseman. And now that he's been focusing on one of the ball and not pitching anymore, that's just completely unlocked, it seems like, his hitting ability, even more so than it was. And so I'm super excited to see him in spring training. I'm actually going to a Giants game in a couple weeks at the A's facility, and so I'm hoping to kind of get an eye on him. And the big thing for me is support, right? One of the things in the previous regime that we didn't really see was like they almost kind of shunned previous players and previous legends and whatnot over the last couple of years. And I don't know why they did that. I don't like, there's been a lot of like talking amongst fans about why that happened. But I'm so excited to see, like, you see some of the guest instructors that are there this spring training, and you see on the list JT Snow, and you're like, he's there for Bryce Eldridge. Like, he's got to be, like, because Bryce Eldridge is still learning first base. He's still learning how to do that defensively. What better guy to have there than a Gold Glover at first base that played with the Giants? And so excited to see that happen, and excited to see him grow in his defense. And I think that's going to be the key. Like, once he's ready defensively, he can hit. Like, as soon as he's ready and kind of gets a little bit more seasoning at AAA, he does have a camp invite. Chances are he doesn't make the roster coming out of spring training. You definitely want to get more seasoning in AAA. But as soon as, I mean, they're talking about, like, does he come up this season? Like, does he come up in June, July? Does he come up later in the season for depth or whatever? And a lot of that I know is going to, factor is going to be Flores and Wade, like we talked about, but it's going to be that balance of how soon do you call him up? Like, I think Buster Posey from firsthand experience knows what that's like. So he's going to be, I think, really careful with how he brings him up, the process of doing that. Because again, a guy like that, you don't want to call him up, and even if he is hitting, he hits really well, but then like somebody comes back from injury, or like you put him at DH and he's not getting kind of into the flow of playing defense or whatever, any number of things. Like, you don't want to kind of toy with that up and down, optioning him and whatnot for a guy with as big of an upside as Eldridge does. But man, he's fun to watch hit, and I cannot wait till he gets up here.
No, definitely. I think that it's going to be an interesting time. You know, as you mentioned, JT Snow. You know, there's a rich history there. You know, Willie McCovey as well. So when you get these kind of big time bats, especially at such a power position, it can really help kind of mold the franchise. So definitely a guy to be paying attention to, as you said. Now, as we kind of look forward towards this upcoming season, you know, I always like to ask about a bold prediction. So what is your bold prediction for the 2025 San Francisco Giants?
Yeah, it's sad a little bit that this is a bold prediction, but my bold prediction is they'll get a wild card spot. They'll sneak in, I think, this time. I think it's one of the. I don't think that it's going to be like a dominant, like it's going to be like last week of the season kind of thing, like kind of just sneak in like they didn't this last year. Like this last year, they kind of faded in the last few weeks. And so I think this year, with the change in direction, with the attitude, like you already kind of see almost like this lighter feel to spring training workouts already. And so you're like, okay, like this is a positive thing. They're moving in the right direction. maybe they sneak into the wild card this year. And that's kind of my bold prediction is no more 500. We're going to sneak into that last wild card spot. And then build on that. That's gonna trigger kind of what I talked about earlier. That's gonna trigger, okay, guys want to play here. Guys are improving. The young guys are improving. The guys are getting kind of better stamina and endurance and whatnot in terms of being able to last the whole season and stuff like that. So that's kind of my thing. Is it's sad that seems bold for the Giants, but that is it. That we make that last wild card spot.
Gotcha. Now, in my kind of preparation for this, one of the guys that I'm very high on in that San Francisco lineup is Elliot Ramos, and so my bold prediction is he becomes the first guy since Barry Bonds to hit 30 home runs for the Giants this season. So
I like it. That's a good bold prediction. I like that. I was a little gun shy on him because I'm like, okay, it kind of burst onto the scene and like, is sophomore slump going to happen or any of that sort of stuff? And so I went kind of the, I guess, safer route of the wild card pick as a team. But I like the Ramos pick. I really hope he kind of takes a step forward there. And whether it's in the outfield or as our DH, they said they're going to kind of rotate the DH position a little bit. We don't have a stereotypical like DH player, DH hitter. And so trying to get him in a lineup with as many at bats, see what he can do with 500, 600 at bats this season instead of, he should have been called up a lot earlier last year. And so seeing him put the season he did and make the all-star team with such a brief track record was super encouraging. And so I hope you're right.
Yeah, like I said, I'm really high on him. I think that he's a guy with tremendous upside, and to have 22 home runs in his rookie campaign, I think, sky's the limit for this guy, especially now with kind of that revamped lineup with Adames and stuff like that. So if they can kind of protect him and almost mask him a little bit in that lineup, I think, opposing teams might overlook him and he can run into a few more bombs. So for sure. In looking at the organization, kind of what do you see as the biggest question mark for San Francisco?
So I think it is something that we've kind of already touched on a couple of times. I think it is Buster Posey. I think it is the front office. I think it's like, how is this going to work? Is it going to work? It's such a 180 from the previous regime and how things were ran with the previous regime. And it's like, okay, like obviously you can't be a Giants fan and not love Buster Posey. Like, I don't think there's a single Giants fan out there that's like, I don't like Buster Posey. I didn't really like having an all-star MVP, like, lead us to 3 championships. Like, I don't really like him. Like, no, like, everybody loves Buster Posey. So, but like, can it translate? How much grace does that afford him to do what he is now doing in terms of the front office side of things? And you've seen him bring in guys that he was familiar with, like Randy Wynn was one of the guys that I'm just like, oh, that's really cool that Randy Wynn is now part of the organization again. And he's kind of been bringing in a lot of the spring training instructors are basically former friends, former players that played with Buster and whatnot. And so, and again, kind of changing the attitude of really like leaning into the guys that have been here before and the guys that kind of built the Giants into the dynasty that they were and could be again. And so I think the biggest unknown is, how does Buster run things? How does we've seen a little bit about it in the off season, but the rubber really hits the road during the season. So it's going to be like, how does he adjust? How does he just take into fan accounts and media and stuff like that? I think he's done pretty well. Like, I know a lot of people give him a hard time for being a boring interview because he just has a lot of like kind of stock answers and whatnot. Like he's kind of the stereotypical, like, the scenes from Bull Durham where they're like teaching him how to answer questions. Like Buster Posey is a lot like that. And so
Jeter school of public speaking.
Yes, exactly. Jeter was another one. Perfect. Yeah. Like and so like it doesn't give you a lot of entertainment value, but I'm like, if we're winning, I couldn't care less about the entertainment value on that side of things. I love Buster Posey. I love how he approaches the game. I love how he thinks. in what I've seen, even as a player. And so I'm excited to kind of see how it goes. I think it will be positive. But that is the biggest unknown. It's just somebody who's jumping from being a player straight to the top baseball personnel position is very rare. And so to see how that goes is a huge question mark.
I mean, not everybody can be Nick Swisher during an interview.
Right?
Yeah. I think that man's got enough energy to power an entire city.
Well, yeah, or like the guy that always comes to mind for me and for the Giants is Hunter Pence, right? Like I love Hunter Pence.
Yeah.
He's great interview, I loved him. He started getting into the booth this last season and commentating some games, and he's absolutely brilliant. And I love having Pence on some of the broadcasts and whatnot. But he's like obviously, like you're saying, complete opposite. He's goofy, he's silly, he's very high energy, he's kind of a nerd. Like it's all those things that Buster is not. And so it's kind of a fun dichotomy there.
I think if Hunter Pence, Nick Swisher, and Eric Burns did a podcast, dude, that thing would be. I mean, I watch Eric Burns and Will Clark sometimes.
And Will Clark, yeah, throw Will Clark in there too.
Eric Burns is just a nut. He is just
Absolutely
out there.
crazy.
I'm like, yo, this guy is hilarious.
He's really funny. A few of my buddies of mine and we started trying to. It's kind of gone by the wayside now, but we always had if you were making a lineup of mic'd up guys, like who would they be? Like who would be your first baseman? Joey Votto. Okay, who would be your center fielder? Charlie Blackmon. Who'd be your all these guys that are just a great mic'd up moment. It's like, how do you make a lineup out of all those guys? Hunter Pence was there for me. So.
Oh, for sure. That would be an absolutely insane lineup for sure. Going through some of the best talkers in the game.
Yeah. It's a fun exercise.
So now let's kind of pivot from that and kind of the opposite end. So instead of what is fun for the Giants fan base, what's kind of the most frustrating thing going into the 2025 campaign?
I think we touched on it a little bit. I think it was just the mediocrity. I think it was just the missing out on big names. Like San Francisco is a place that has had star power in the past, whether it's been longer with Mays or Marichal or McCovey or any of those guys, to more recently with Bonds and then like Posey and those guys. Like there's always been some sort of star power with San Francisco, whether it's been as blatant as Bonds or as more understated as like Belt and Crawford. Like there's always been a specific draw of players, and we haven't, because of the previous regime's outlook on how baseball should be managed and played and constructed. The fans couldn't get on board with that. Like there was no fan engagement. Like you're not going to go buy a jersey of a guy who plays 50 games. Like there was just no engagement between the fans and the players, even though there were a lot of really likable players and a lot of players that you could really latch onto. Like I watch all the games with my kids. My kids all have favorite players and whatnot. And so, but that's from a diehard Giants family. Like it's from somebody who's just kind of watching the Giants, maybe lives in San Francisco, who's just kind of fairly engaged. Like there was nobody to really engage with, and because they were you never knew what the lineup was going to look like. And so I think that was the biggest frustration, that it just wasn't fun. Like there was just no fun to the lineups, to the and that goes. I mean, you look at Farhan. Like no offense to him, but he's not a fun dude. Like he's kind of a nerd. Like he knows the numbers, and like he was really effective with the Dodgers. Don't get me wrong, but like here it just was. Yeah, this isn't really flying. And like Gabe Kapler, like a lot of people didn't like his hire when it first happened, and I think he kind of just lucked into a manager of the year, in my opinion. And so he kind of rode that a little bit. But again, it was just going back to my earlier point. It was just boring. It wasn't fun. You couldn't engage with anybody, and so there was no star to latch onto. And so I think we're starting to change that this offseason. And so I think going into this offseason, that was the frustration. And so I know that there are a lot of Giants fans that wish they did more. Maybe they, like some people believe, Juan Soto is a generational talent. They should have thrown everything they had at him. I don't personally believe that. But that is the kind of star power that Giants fans have been looking for. And I think, again, we're starting to get the ball rolling, and we've got a little bit about that of that with the guys that they are signing and are developing, that people can get invested now. Like Chapman's going to be there for a while now. Adames is going to be there for a while. Jung-Hoo Lee is going to be there for a while. Like, so you can start to engage with these guys a little bit more effectively and actually attach to favorite players that every kid dreams about, right? Like you have every kid grows up. I loved Buster's, like in his very first press conference where he said, we're in the memory making business. Like that is what Giants fans have been severely lacking. Like there have been no memory making instances, whether it's attaching to players or success on the field or whatever. And so seeing that happen now is really, really encouraging. But I think that was that has been the biggest frustration, is just that aspect of like, there is no memories. Like I can't invest in this team.
Now, as we look at this team more in depthly here, how would you grade out the offense for San Francisco heading into the 25 campaign?
So I'd probably give it a C right now. I think like it's improving. It's on its way up. It's kind of on the upswing, but I can't give it an A or a B quite yet. Like you think the way I kind of tear it down, work backwards, reverse engineer this thing, right? Like the Dodgers are an A, right? Like they've got all the different things. Like I would put some other teams on there. The Phillies, the Yankees, I know have flaws, but I would put them kind of up in that top tier as well. So some of those teams, it's like, okay, B, maybe a B is like, okay, you're maybe one superstar away, or maybe you're like one good pitcher away, or whatever. Like you're close. You're close to having a really built out roster. And so I think because we're getting the ball rolling and trying to turn the ship, so to speak, I think C is a really actually respectable place to be. And I think that's where we've been with the signings of Chapman, with the signings of Verlander and Adames, going back to Jung-Hoo Lee before last year, just starting to build out that consistency. And they do have in the lineup those guys that, if given a chance regularly, and sticking with them and encouraging them and growing them, like the guys like Ramos, like Fitzgerald, even going to the bench, guys like Casey Schmidt, like those guys that can benefit from having a regular pace of their life to be able to, I'm going to go to the ballpark and I am penciled in at second base every day, like unless something drastic changes. And so like having that kind of regularity to the lineup, I think it can improve really quickly. And as they go into next offseason and whatever signings they make and whatnot in the next offseason, as they try and repair their minor league system and whatnot to come in behind the guys that are already there, I think C is kind of where they're at. They're kind of right in the middle, which is really frustrating to say, because all the Giants fans' frustration is that we've been in the middle and we've been kind of at that 500 level. But I don't, like I said earlier, I don't think this is a 500 team. I think they do better than that, and I think the lineup, the hitting lineup, and the bench is just a C right now. If they got a couple pieces, maybe they're doing really well, and they buy at the trade deadline, then that'd be great. Like that can move up this season. Flip side of that, I would still keep them at a C if they're not doing as great as I'm hoping, and they're sellers at the deadline, and they kind of rebuild get some prospects and start to rebuild that minor league system a little bit. That's been a little hit or miss. And so I think that the C is kind of right in the sweet spot of where they're at.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, in my game planning for this, I have them at a C plus. I think that I gave them a little bit more of an edge just because I do think highly of some of those acquisitions. I think that Adames is going to make a big difference in terms of how the rest of that lineup is pitched. And I think a big year out of Ramos is coming. So had to give it a little bit more of a boost there, but I agree with you. I think that right now it's about average, but with room for improvement. Now, on the pitching side of things, how would you grade out the pitching for the Giants in 25?
So pitching, I'm a little bit more optimistic. I gave them a B. I think that like the Verlander edition is huge. I think there are a lot of question marks, but not question marks that maybe bring down the grade. For me, it's a B in terms of depth. Like we don't know. Well, like we have two, three, four guys fighting for the last rotation spot. Our bullpen is phenomenal, even though we just got rid of Rogers, our lefty Rogers. But I think our bullpen is phenomenal. Last year, their numbers were great. The bullpen was awesome. They just got gas because they were used so often, and they were used for so many more innings than they're used to. And so I think that the bullpen is really, really great. I think that's what actually brings it up for me is the bullpen. Ryan Walker is a revelation at closer. Having him set up now by Doval instead of the other way around, I think is going to be huge for the whole season. Doval kind of fixing between his ears this last season has been great. And so having those guys at the back end of your bullpen is just going to be phenomenal. And then, yeah, looking at the starters, like everything is like, okay, guys are more used to kind of the grind, so to speak. Like they had to kind of adjust last year. Robbie Ray, former Cy Young, right? Like he is still coming back. Like he came back and was super inconsistent last year. Well, because he's still figuring his arm out. Like there's still that process. And so now that he's had a full off season to kind of work that, like I think Robbie Ray has a really great season this year, or at least a number two starter type season that we're expecting from him last year. But so obviously Logan Webb is Logan Webb. He's the ace. He's going to do great. If we get any semblance, any percentage of Justin Verlander, how we know he can pitch, that'll be great. And then you've got the younger guys that just need to understand. Like Jordan Hicks was one of the best five pitchers in baseball the first month and a half of the season last year. He just lost his legs. He got burned out. And that happens for a guy who's changing from a reliever to a starter. And so having this full offseason now, same thing with Birdsong, really young guy. Harrison starting to understand. He had more starts than those guys, but starting to understand how to make it through an entire season. Again, very young guy. And then just other guys coming up, whether it's we were talking about prospects earlier, Carson Wisenhunt that's coming. He's been great in the minor leagues and could have a shot at getting called up this year. And so I think there's a lot of depth guys like Keaton Wynn, who, like we said, is injured now, but could be a serviceable starter. I just think it's not as good as the Dodgers, but we do have a lot of depth there that could be a positive, and why I gave them a B.
Yeah, so I gave him a C plus in my evaluation, and it's kind of a combination of like what you mentioned with them last year, kind of losing their legs. And for me, I'm really curious to see how they bounce back. I think that it easily can bump up, seeing how they kind of mature in their growth as a pitching department. Again, I'm a very big believer that the intangibles that Verlander brings can help with that.
Yeah.
But, kind of the worn down nature of the bullpen, and we know that sometimes that can have a lingering and carryover effect.
Sure.
So going into this, that's kind of where I saw the pitching staff for San Francisco as a C plus. Borderlining on that B minus level because of just the questions about how much they have in the tank going in, and how much based on how much they were used in 2024. So definitely an interesting thing. Now, as we kind of get towards the end here, we look at the divisional rankings for the upcoming season. And both Pacoda and Fangraphs have you guys listed at 4th place in the NL West.
Mm-hmm.
With Pacoda, they have you under 500 at 78 and 84, and Fangraphs has you at exactly 500 at 81 and 81. So in kind of your estimation of the Giants, where do they land in the division, and kind of what does that win total look like?
Yeah, so that's kind of what goes into my bold prediction, right? Like I think that they're getting into the last wild card spot, which I think means they get to 3rd in the division. I think it's going to be a 3-horse race between, like, the Dodgers are far away. I mean, Pacoda had them at 104 wins, I think, if I remember correctly. they could win 125. Like, I mean, you take it with a grain of salt. And so for me, I don't think this is a 500 ball club. I think we could do better than that in terms of Fangraphs' number. But I think they end up in third in the division. I think there will be 3 playoff teams from this division. And so I think the Dodgers will obviously be there. And I think it's a 3-horse race between the Giants, Diamondbacks, and Padres. And you can almost pick your poison, like 2 through 4. Who's it going to be? I'm down on the Padres. I know a lot of people are saying like, the Padres are still good. I'm a little down on them. I think they might be the odd one out. I think Corbin Burns going to the Diamondbacks was huge, and would have loved to see him in orange and black, but not the Orioles. I think it's a 3-horse race between those last 2 spots of the division. I think 3 teams from this division make the playoffs. It's just a matter of, is it going to be the Giants, Diamondbacks, or Padres? Which 2 of those make it in? Good news is we're not going to be last. That's like kind of already going to be the Rockies. We already know that. So I don't think 4 is like, if they do end up at 500, I think there's going to be a lot of an outcry of like, oh, same old, same old. But at the same time, like I'm not going to count 500 as a failure. I think it's like when you're trying to right the ship, right? Like it's gonna take a minute, and so I don't feel like a 500 season is a failure. But that being said, I do think that that's why it's a little bit of a stretch and a little bit of a bold prediction that they'll be in that last wild card spot. I put them at 86 wins, and so that's I feel like it's gonna be kind of one of those weird years where like an 86 win team gets in. And so I don't think they have to necessarily. Yeah, exactly. I don't think you have to win 90 games, 95 games to get into the playoffs this season. So I think there's a lot more parity going into this season. I know that's funny to say with the Dodgers, but I do think that overall there is a lot more parity going into this season. And so I think that they'll kind of sneak in there with the 86 win total.
So in my estimation, I kind of am in line more with Fangraphs and Pacoda in terms of where you land in the division. But I do think that you get over 500. I think it's going to be more like 83, 84 wins for San Francisco. I do think that they're going to be battling, and we'll get to that in a moment. But I think that that's kind of where they end up. Now, as we kind of wrap up here and kind of, in the name of this series, what do you believe is the state of the franchise for the San Francisco Giants?
I am an eternal optimist. I know that I am kind of in the minority of that, especially with Giants fans. I think a lot of Giants fans are very pessimistic. All you have to do is go on Giants Twitter for that. But I do think that they are a wild card contender, like I said, and so I think that's kind of where. And then I think they're trending up. Like I think that's kind of their state right now. Is like they can contend for a wild card spot, but they're trending up. They're trying to turn this thing around from mediocrity and trying to, without completely tearing it all down, trying to improve and try to incrementally get better. And to me, that's more of a positive outlook than like, I like that outlook more than like, let's just tear it all down and suck for a couple years. To me, that's not getting better. Like anything in life, I'm a big believer, anything in life, you should be getting incrementally better every step you take. Like tearing it all down and being like, we're going to suck for 2 years, 3 years, whatever, and just draft really well so that we can be good for the next 4 or 5 years. To me, that doesn't fly. To me, that's not getting better. That's not being responsible. That's not using your resources well. I think they are on the right track this offseason with the new Buster Posey-led regime here of like, let's right the ship. We're going in a better direction here and a different direction. And we're incrementally improving every day. And you've kind of seen that with the moves that they've made and whatnot, and some of the kind of intangibles that we've talked about in terms of culture and environment and lineup construction and all that sort of stuff. Honestly, my biggest concern is Bob Melvin. Like I don't think he's a bad manager. Don't get me wrong. I think he's kind of in the middle. Like I wouldn't say he's a phenomenal manager. He's not a bad manager. He's kind of decent. And so like it is kind of one of those things like, oh, as long as Melvin doesn't screw this up, like then I think we're on to something here, and I think we're on the right track here. And I not to say I don't think Bob Melvin will do that. I think he's a smart enough guy to kind of see what's going on and kind of lean into that. But we'll see kind of how that goes. But yeah, so in terms of state of the franchise, trending upward, we'll use that assessment there, and just different than it has been, which is good.
I mean,
For
in
sure.
Bob Melvin's defense, it's not like he's had a stellar team his entire managerial career to like hang his hat on. You know,
Yeah,
all
for
those
sure.
years in Oakland, you know, the 1 year in San Diego or 2 years in San Diego, whatever the hell it was, and then last year in San Fran. I mean, it's not like
Yeah, and I think there is a talent.
worked with.
Yeah, but I do think that there is a talent to be said for that. I mean, look at Joe Torre with your Yankees. I mean, like he kind of gets a bad rap,
Well,
so to speak, because he had all these superstars. I think it's the same thing. I think there's still a talent there to be able to manage that well.
The thing with Torre is that he had such a balance between veteran players and up and coming stud rookies. I mean, look
Absolutely.
at that '96 team. You had John Wetland, Nelson, Stanton, and then you had the young guys coming in with Jeter and Pettit and Mo. So you had this balance. Like Joe Torre in the late '90s to early 2000s, he didn't really have to do much. All he had to do was go out there and make a freaking pitching change, and the rest of it kind of just took care of itself because those players knew how to police themselves. They knew how to play the game. They knew what to do day in and day out. Like Torre didn't have to do a damn thing besides show up and go out and make a pitching change once in a while.
But I think there is value to, like, it's going to sound weird to say, I think there's value to staying out of the way, like, and not overcomplicating things. Like it's like, again, another example, like it's like, oh, well, Phil Jackson wasn't a great coach because he had Jordan and Kobe and Shaq and like these different superstars that could dominate a game. Well, no, like sometimes he knew when to stay out of the way and let them do their thing and let them be themselves. And so same thing, I think, with Torre a little bit. And now hopefully with Melvin going forward with the Giants is like, hey, take your hands off a little bit. Like it's not going to be like the previous regime where you're micromanaging everything. Like let the kids play, so to speak. Like let's let them kind of do their thing and be who they are. And like, can you imagine like Hunter, like we talked about Hunter Pence earlier, can you imagine Hunter Pence trying to play for Gabe Kapler? Like that's just mind-boggling to me. Like, yeah, like it's mind-boggling to me. And so, and we did see a couple of instances where Kapler just didn't have the room. Like he was taking out relievers and they were shouting at him. I mean, like, and so there is something to be said for staying out of the way. And I think that if Melvin can do that at certain points and not overmanage, that I think even the best managers, look at Bruce Bochy. I mean, like one of the things that drove me absolutely insane about Bruce Bochy was like I felt at times he was overmanaging and he was making pitching changes when he shouldn't have and all these things. But hey, he led us to championships, man. Like, yeah. So I mean, like that covers a lot of sins. So I mean, it is one of those things where I'm just like, okay, like don't mess it up. Like don't, like take your hands off it when you need to.
Yeah, definitely. I had them in the same spot. You know, I think that they are going to be battling all season long for one of those wild card spots. I think that they're going to be in that mix and in that hunt, even, you know, late into the September. I do think ultimately that they probably won't get there, finishing in fourth place. But I think that they, like you said, are trending in an upward direction for sure. So, Josh, we want to thank you for joining us. Let everybody know where they can find you at for more content from you.
Yeah, I'm super involved on X. So you can, my tag there is at Baseball Thinking, because it's just, that's the company that we are actually starting to build is Baseball Thinking, because it's just baseball on the mind 24/7, right? And so that's, and I have a tendency to think about the game in different ways than a lot of people do. And so I'm on Twitter mostly. We'll see if I branch out in any other social media, but that's where I'm at. And then we've got some things coming down the pike in terms of other podcasts and merch and all that sort of fun stuff that we'll be working on later in the season. Right now I'm in school, and so it's a little bit hard to jumping into that. And just something weird about me, I'm also a dad of 6, so my time is
God bless
very
you, man. Damn.
my time is very, very thin. And so but that's part of it. My kids are starting to get older, they're starting to get into the game, and so like we've got some things coming in where my kids are going to be a part of it, and things of that nature. And so yeah, at Baseball Thinking on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, that you can check me out there. And it's not just Giants content. Yes, there is a heavy Giants content there, but I love the game of baseball, have since I was 3 years old. And so I just have a tendency to think about things. People call me a baseball millennial because I'm kind of in the middle. I love the old school of the game. I love a lot of the new things that are happening. And so I am kind of caught in between those two worlds a lot of times. And I like to kind of be the peacemaker of, not everything's mutually exclusive. So if you want something that's a little bit not Stephen A. Smith type stuff, you can come over to my page and come hang out with a little bit more level-headed people.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. So, but again, we want to thank you for joining us. It's been an excellent conversation, kind of deep diving into the world of the San Francisco Giants. So we definitely want to thank you for joining us here once again.
Yeah,
so,
man, I appreciate you having me, and I'm looking forward to seeing more from you guys.
And
Absolutely.
before we go, just want to let everybody know that we have our own merch store up on Printify. So baseball banter merch.printify.me. That's where you can find our stuff at. And if anyone's into collecting sports cards, I have my own Whatnot lobby. Gilly sells the cards on Whatnot. Come hang out with me. I do some really fun auction type pull box stuff with chaser prizes and all that jazz. So check me out.
He's
there.
always got something going on there. So definitely check him out if you're into card collecting.
It's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
A lot of fun.
So once again, this has been Josh with Baseball Thinking on X. Make sure you follow him. Make sure you leave a like on this video if you're on the YouTube side, and subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell for post notifications. And if you're on the audio side, make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review. We want to thank you once again for joining us on this installment of the State of the Franchise. Peace.